Quantum Entanglement. Chapter 1. Fractured Realities. In the heart of a clandestine laboratory, where the walls echoed with the secrets of science yet to be revealed, Adrian stood, a figure of resolve against the backdrop of humming machines and flickering lights. His lab was a shrine to human ingenuity, filled with devices and instruments that many could scarcely dream of. At the center of it all lay the reason for his tireless pursuit, a quantum teleportation chamber, pulsating with a mesmerizing blue glow, promising to unlock the mysteries of the universe. Adrian, with his sharp eyes and a mind that danced on the edge of genius, was a maverick in the world of theoretical physics. His experiments were the kind that pushed boundaries, testing the limits of what was known and accepted. Today, he was poised on the brink of making history. If successful, his experiment would redefine the realms of possibility. Initiating sequence, Adrian declared, his voice a blend of excitement and trepidation. The chamber responded, its glow intensifying, bathing the entire lab in a surreal, azure light. MIA, his trusted assistant, watched the controls with intense concentration, her fingers dancing over the panels with practiced ease. As the energy within the chamber swelled to its zenith, an unexpected anomaly occurred. A brilliant flash enveloped the room, followed by a thunderous roar, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn asunder. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the world holding its breath. When the light dimmed, Adrian found himself caught in a reality he could not have predicted. He was standing in the lab, yet also inside the chamber. Two separate existences, yet both undeniably him. His mind raced to comprehend this baffling duality, the implications of which were as terrifying as they were wondrous. MIA rushed to his side, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "Adrian, what happened? Are you all right?" But Adrian was barely aware of her words. His focus was on the extraordinary phenomenon he was experiencing. He was quantum entangled, his very being existing in two different locations simultaneously. The chamber, a testament to his brilliance, had become a portal to a reality that defied all known laws of physics. His heart pounded in his chest, not just with the thrill of scientific breakthrough, but with a growing sense of trepidation. He had sought to transcend the limits of human understanding, to venture into the unknown. But now, faced with the reality of his achievement, he felt a creeping sense of unease. Around him, the lab, once a sanctuary of control and precision, seemed unfamiliar, almost alien. He was a pioneer who had stepped into uncharted territory, a realm where the boundaries between science and the unknown blurred into obscurity. As he stood there, grappling with the magnitude of what he had unleashed, Adrian realized that his journey into the unknown had only just begun. Chapter 2. Duality's Edge. Adrian's new reality, split between two existences, was like living inside a puzzle that he himself had inadvertently designed. On one side, he was in his lab, amidst the familiar hum of machines and the sterile smell of technology. On the other, he found himself at home, a stark contrast with its warm hues and the comforting aroma of coffee. In the lab, his existence was scientific, methodical. He analyzed data, ran diagnostics, and worked tirelessly to understand the phenomenon that had befallen him. The lab's atmosphere was one of urgency, each beep of the machines a reminder of the anomaly he had become. Conversely, his home life was a jumble of ordinary activities, now made extraordinary by his condition. Adrian experienced the mundane tasks of daily life, making breakfast, reading the newspaper, but with the constant awareness of his other self, conducting experiments miles away. Initially, there was a novelty to this dual existence. Adrian found humor in the small things, like answering a colleague's question in the lab while simultaneously pouring a cup of coffee at home. It was a surreal experience, akin to being the main character in a science fiction story. But the charm of this new life soon gave way to complexity. Conversations became challenging, as he would often respond to a question asked in one location while in the middle of a conversation in the other. His sleep was erratic, his mind unable to fully rest when part of him was always awake. More concerning were the moments of dissonance when his two realities seemed to clash. Once, while working on his equipment in the lab, he felt the sensation of burning his hand on the stove at home. The pain was real, yet there was no physical injury in the lab. These experiences began to blur the lines between his dual realities, making it increasingly difficult to distinguish one from the other. The complications of his dual life became evident in his work. The precision and focus that once defined his scientific endeavors were now marred by the unpredictability of his existence. Data was misread, experiments were inconclusive, and his once impeccable record now bore the marks of human error. It wasn't just his professional life that suffered. At home, the disconnect became more pronounced. Conversations with friends and family grew strained, his responses often out of sync with the discussion. The warmth of his home, once a haven, now felt like a distant memory, muddled by the constant awareness of his other self in the lab. As days turned into weeks, the initial wonder of his situation faded, replaced by a growing sense of isolation. Adrian realized that this quantum entanglement, once a thrilling breakthrough, had become a prison of his own making. He was neither here nor there, but lost somewhere in between. One evening, as he sat in his lab, simultaneously watching the sunset from his living room window, the full weight of his predicament dawned on him. This duality wasn't just a scientific anomaly. It was a challenge to his very identity. Who was he if he was in two places at once? Was he the same person in both, or had this experience fragmented his very being? Adrian knew he couldn't continue like this. The implications of his entangled state were far more profound than he had initially realized. It wasn't just a question of managing two lives. It was a question of understanding the essence of his existence. And as he pondered these thoughts, he knew that the journey to untangle his reality had only just begun. Chapter 3: Manipulating the Ether. In the solitude of his lab, Adrian, driven by a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, embarked on a series of clandestine experiments. He was now a scientist turned subject, delving into the uncharted territory of his own existence. The lab, once a place of discovery, had transformed into a testing ground for his new reality. His first experiment was simple yet daring. Sitting at his desk in the lab, he focused on moving a pen at his home. He concentrated, envisioning the pen in his mind, feeling its weight, its texture. Slowly, the pen began to tremble, then rolled a few inches across the table. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. The thrill of success was tempered by the shock of the impossible made real. Encouraged by this initial success, Adrian's experiments grew bolder. He discovered he could manipulate small objects, turn pages of a book, even change the channels on the television from miles away. Each successful experiment was a step further into this new world, a world where thought and reality intertwined. With each experiment, Adrian's confidence grew, but so did his unease. The implications of his abilities were vast and uncharted. He was careful to document each test, noting every detail, every sensation. The air in the lab was thick with the electricity of discovery. Each breath he took charged with potential. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Adrian attempted his most ambitious experiment yet. He decided to try altering something more significant. From the lab, he visualized the heavy oak tree in his backyard, feeling its rough bark and sturdy branches in his mind. He focused on one of the branches, willing it to bend. At first, nothing happened. But as he concentrated harder, a deep sense of connection enveloped him. Suddenly, with a loud crack that echoed through his dual senses, the branch snapped and fell to the ground. The sound of the breaking branch was like a gunshot, breaking the spell of concentration. Adrian staggered back, the reality of what he had done crashing over him like the waves of the storm outside. He had altered the physical world with nothing but his will. This experiment marked a turning point. The power he wielded was no longer a curious anomaly. It was a force capable of tangible change. Adrian sat in his lab, the glow of the monitors casting shadows on his face, his mind racing with the possibilities and dangers of his newfound ability. He realized that his entangled state was more than a scientific curiosity. It was a window into a realm of physics that defied understanding. But with this realization came a profound responsibility. The potential to alter reality was a power that demanded caution and respect. As the storm outside waned, Adrian sat alone with his thoughts. The weight of his discovery was heavy upon him. He had crossed a threshold into a world where the lines between thought and reality, science and the supernatural, were blurred. And as he pondered the extent of his powers, he knew that the journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty and the potential for consequences he could scarcely imagine. Chapter 4. Eyes of the State. The revelation of Adrian's extraordinary abilities soon rippled beyond the confines of his lab, drawing the attention of those with power and agendas of their own. It was on a cold, overcast morning when they arrived, a group of government officials, their demeanor as stern as their black suits. They convened in Adrian's lab, a place of scientific pursuit now cast in the shadow of political intrigue. The lead official, a woman with sharp features and piercing eyes, introduced herself as Agent Holloway. She wasted no time, laying out the reason for their visit with clinical precision. Dr. Adrian, your research, and the anomalies surrounding it have come to our attention, she began, her gaze fixed on him. We believe your abilities could be of significant interest to national security. Adrian, who had spent his career in pursuit of knowledge, found himself at a crossroads he had never anticipated. The very notion of his research being used for purposes beyond scientific exploration was both alarming and morally ambiguous. I'm a scientist, not a weapon, Adrian countered, his voice steady, but his mind racing with the implications of her words. Agent Holloway leaned forward, her expression unyielding. Dr. Adrian, consider the potential. Your abilities could be invaluable in intelligence, defense. Areas far beyond the scope of your current research. The room tensed as other officials nodded in agreement. They spoke of scenarios and applications, of power and control, words that were foreign in Adrian's world of hypotheses and experiments. Adrian felt a growing sense of unease. The conversation was no longer about science. It was about power, and the potential misuse of his abilities was a prospect that filled him with dread. I cannot condone the use of my research for such purposes, Adrian declared, his voice tinged with a mixture of fear and defiance. The ethical implications are too profound. This power, if not handled with the utmost care, could lead to consequences we can't even begin to comprehend. Agent Holloway's expression hardened. Dr. Adrian, this is bigger than individual ethics. Consider the greater good, the safety of the nation, perhaps even the world. The meeting descended into a heated debate, with Adrian defending the sanctity of scientific research against the backdrop of national interest and security. The more they spoke, the more he realized the gravity of his situation. His discovery, once a source of wonder, had become a beacon that drew the gaze of forces far more powerful than he had anticipated. As the officials left, their parting words were a veiled warning. Adrian's research, and his very existence, were now matters of national interest. The lab, once a haven of discovery, now felt like a glass cage, transparent to the eyes of those who sought to use his powers for their own ends. Alone in the quiet aftermath of the confrontation, Adrian grappled with the realization that his life had irrevocably changed. He was no longer just a scientist. He was a person of interest, a potential asset or threat in the eyes of the government. The weight of this realization was suffocating. Adrian understood that with great power came great responsibility, and now, great danger. As he sat in his lab, the hum of the machines a faint background noise, he knew that the path ahead was fraught with moral dilemmas and the very real risk of losing control of his own destiny. Chapter 5. Quantum Fugitive. Adrian, once a devotee of the serene world of scientific research, found himself thrust into a heart-pounding race for freedom. The realization that he was now a target, a piece in a larger game of power and control, had crystallized in his mind. Escape was not just a choice, it was a necessity. In the dead of night, under the cover of darkness, Adrian set his plan into motion. He knew that the conventional means of escape would be futile against the watchful eyes of the government. His advantage lay in the very thing that had put him in this predicament, his quantum abilities. He started by creating subtle diversions at his home and lab simultaneously. In his lab, machines spontaneously malfunctioned, sending sparks flying and alarms blaring, drawing the attention of the security personnel. Meanwhile, at his home, lights flickered erratically, and electronic devices turned on and off, creating a scene of haunting disarray. With the security personnel distracted, Adrian made his move. He slipped out of the lab, a shadow merging with the night. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the adrenaline of the escape, but from the surreal nature of his actions. He was manipulating reality itself to pave his path to freedom. The chase that ensued was like a dance between realms. Adrian used his dual existence to his advantage, creating confusion and misdirection. He would appear in one place, only to vanish and reappear elsewhere. The government agents, trained for conventional pursuits, found themselves grappling with an adversary who defied the very laws of physics. Despite his extraordinary abilities, Adrian's escape was fraught with danger. He narrowly avoided capture several times, the sound of footsteps and shouting always too close for comfort. The night air was filled with the sounds of his pursuit, the screeching of tires, the barking of dogs, the urgent voices of his pursuers. As he darted through alleyways and across darkened streets, Adrian realized the true extent of his predicament. He was not just fleeing from the government, he was running from the implications of his own power. Each use of his ability to evade capture was a stark reminder of the fine line he was treading between control and chaos. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Adrian found a moment of respite. He ducked into an abandoned warehouse, its vast emptiness a stark contrast to the chaos of the chase. His breathing was heavy, his mind racing with the events of the night. In the quiet of the warehouse, hidden in the shadows, Adrian allowed himself a moment to reflect. He had escaped, but the sense of victory was hollow. He was now a fugitive, hunted for the very abilities that he had once celebrated as a pinnacle of scientific achievement. As he sat there, the gravity of his situation settled upon him. He was alone, a man out of sync with the world, both figuratively and literally. The pursuit of knowledge had led him down a path where the line between discovery and danger was blurred. Adrian realized that his journey was far from over. The night's escape was just the beginning of a larger struggle, a struggle for autonomy, for understanding, and for a place in a world that was not ready for the reality-bending powers he possessed. Chapter 6. Ethical Echoes. In the stillness of a nondescript hideout, far from the prying eyes of the world, Adrian found himself in the throes of a profound moral quandary. His once clear-cut world of scientific inquiry had morphed into a labyrinth of ethical dilemmas, each turn fraught with implications both wondrous and terrifying. As he sat alone, the dim light casting long shadows across the room, Adrian's mind wandered through the corridors of his past. He recalled his early days as a bright-eyed scientist, driven by a pure quest for knowledge, untainted by the complexities of power and consequence. Those were simpler times, when the line between right and wrong seemed so clear, so absolute. A flashback took him to a moment in his youth, a conversation with his mentor, Professor Lindstrom. Remember, Adrian, the professor had said, his wise eyes looking into the soul of his young protege, with great knowledge comes great responsibility. It's not just about what you can do, but what you should do. Those words now echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of the responsibility that his extraordinary powers entailed. Adrian pondered the potential of his quantum abilities. He could be a force for incredible good, altering reality to solve insurmountable problems, to heal, to create. But equally, he could be an instrument of destruction, a tool for those who sought control and domination. The weight of this duality was suffocating. Adrian felt the burden of choice, a choice that was his alone to make. How could he wield such power responsibly? Could he trust himself to navigate the thin line between benevolence and tyranny? His thoughts drifted to the recent confrontation with the government agents. They saw him as a weapon, a means to an end. But Adrian knew he was more than that. He was a man, a scientist, with the heart and mind to discern the course of his actions. Yet, the temptation to use his powers for personal gain or out of fear was a constant shadow, looming over his every decision. A memory surfaced, a moment of triumph in his career when he had made a breakthrough discovery. The accolades, the recognition, it had been intoxicating. But even then, there had been a voice inside him, whispering of humility, of the need to stay grounded in the face of monumental success. Now, as he grappled with a power that dwarfed all his previous achievements, Adrian felt that voice again, guiding him, urging him to consider the ramifications of his actions. He thought of the people he could help, the lives that could be changed for the better. But he also envisioned the chaos, the potential for harm, the risk of playing God with a force he barely understood. The night wore on, and Adrian sat in contemplation, his mind a battleground of conflicting ideals and fears. The responsibility of his power was a heavy crown, one he had never sought nor desired. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the cracks of his hideout, Adrian came to a moment of decision. He knew he could not hide forever, nor could he ignore the implications of his abilities. He had to take a stand, to decide the path he would walk. With a deep breath, Adrian made his choice. He would use his powers, but with caution, with respect for the delicate balance of the world around him. He would not be a pawn in the games of power, nor a reckless god wielding his might without forethought. This decision was not the end, but a beginning. A beginning of a journey that would test his resolve, his ethics, and his very understanding of what it meant to be human. Adrian knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that his actions would be guided by a moral compass forged in the crucible of his experiences. Chapter 7. Causality's Ripple. As Adrian embraced his new role as a guardian of an extraordinary power, a critical situation arose, pushing him to the brink of a decision that would forever alter the course of his life and the very fabric of reality. A catastrophic event unfolded, a massive earthquake in a densely populated city. As the news flooded in, images of destruction and despair, Adrian knew this was the moment he had to act. This was his opportunity to use his powers for a greater good, to save lives. With a deep sense of purpose, Adrian focused his abilities on the city. He visualized the crumbling buildings, the streets torn apart, and the people trapped in the chaos. His intention was clear: to stabilize the structures, to prevent further collapse, to save as many lives as he could. The air around him crackled with energy as he channeled his power, his mind a conduit for a force that defied understanding. He felt the quantum threads of reality bend to his will, the very essence of matter and energy responding to his command. As Adrian exerted his influence, something extraordinary happened. The city, miles away, began to transform. Buildings that were on the brink of collapse suddenly shored up, their foundations strengthening as if by an invisible hand. People trapped in the rubble felt the weight above them lighten, allowing them to escape to safety. For a moment, it seemed as if Adrian had succeeded, that he had harnessed his power for an undeniable good. But then, the twist of fate unfurled. The alteration of reality at such a scale had unforeseen consequences. The city, saved from immediate destruction, began to experience anomalies. Time and space seemed to warp, creating pockets where the laws of physics no longer applied. Objects floated in mid-air, people found themselves in two places at once, and the very structure of the city became a labyrinth of quantum irregularities. Adrian watched in horror as the news reported these strange phenomena. His heart sank as he realized the extent of his actions. In his attempt to play savior, he had inadvertently turned the city into a zone of quantum instability. The gravity of his mistake weighed heavily on him. He had acted with the best intentions, but his lack of understanding of the full scope of his powers had led to a reality he could not have predicted. The city, while saved from the earthquake, was now a place where the normal rules of existence no longer applied. As Adrian grappled with the consequences of his actions, he understood that his journey with his powers was far more complex and perilous than he had ever imagined. The twist in his tale was not just a moment of unexpected outcome, but a profound revelation of the delicate balance of reality and the dangers of altering it, even with the noblest of intentions. In the wake of this event, Adrian knew that his life could never return to the simplicity of scientific pursuit. He was now inextricably linked to a world where his every action could have monumental consequences, a world where the line between heroism and hubris was perilously thin. Chapter 8. Resonance of Decisions. In the aftermath of the quantum upheaval he had unwittingly unleashed, Adrian found himself at a crossroads, his life irrevocably altered. The city, now a bewildering blend of normalcy and quantum anomalies, stood as a stark testament to the unintended consequences of his actions. It was a vivid reminder of the perilous tightrope he walked between being a savior and an inadvertent harbinger of chaos. Retreating to a secluded location, far from the eyes of the world and the complexities of his newfound existence, Adrian grappled with the gravity of his situation. The city, with its warping reality, was both a symbol of his potential to do good and a glaring example of his capacity to disrupt the very fabric of existence. In this quiet solitude, Adrian reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He pondered the decisions he had made, the paths he had chosen, and the unforeseen ramifications of wielding a power that defied understanding. The weight of responsibility, the burden of choice, lay heavy on his shoulders. As he looked out over the tranquil landscape, a stark contrast to the quantum-tangled city, Adrian made a critical decision. He resolved that his powers, while formidable, needed to be wielded with a newfound respect and caution. The line between helping and interfering, between saving and altering, was a delicate one, and he could not tread it lightly. Adrian decided to withdraw from the world, to seclude himself until he could fully comprehend the scope and limits of his abilities. He would not shun his powers, but he would not wield them recklessly either. His journey with his quantum abilities was far from over, but it would be a journey marked by contemplation and a profound respect for the natural order of things. In the final scene, Adrian stands alone, looking up at the stars, a vast tapestry of cosmic wonder stretching out above him. The night sky, a symbol of the infinite unknown, mirrored the uncharted territory of his own existence. He knew that the world, with all its complexities and mysteries, was still out there, waiting for him. But for now, he was content to watch, to learn, and to understand. The story ends with Adrian's figure silhouetted against the night, a lone sentinel at the edge of an ever-expanding universe. His journey had brought him to this moment of quiet introspection, a moment where the past and the future converged in the present. The possibilities were endless, the path ahead uncertain, but Adrian faced it with a sense of humble resolve. As the stars twinkled above, A faint smile graced Adrian's lips, a silent acknowledgement of the journey ahead. The world, with all its wonders and dangers, would have to wait. For now, Adrian was a student once again, learning the lessons of a universe far more complex and wondrous than he had ever imagined.